Welcome back, loved ones. It's your guy, Seth Garu Baxter, and you are on the Seth Garu podcast with Maker's Bar, where we're creating 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. Now, I have shared with some of you as my guests my appreciation and fondness of the opera and my wanting and strong desires to make acquaintances with those leaders who are providing quality music and interesting programs. I came across in my pursuits, somewhat spiritually connected, Hildegard, an opera and its composer who immediately touched my spirit. Well, her name is Sarah Kirkland Snider, and she has been a vision of beauty and a great deal of what I had hoped to reintroduce me into that format. I'm here today just having a conversation with her about her journey, Hildegard, the program itself, and all of her creative processes that she's willing to share with us in her story. I'm honored, Sarah, that you have joined us today on my show. Thank you so much for making the time for us.
Thank you so much for having me, Seth. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here speaking with you.
Thank you so much. So, Sarah, my dad brought me, my first introduction into opera was with The Marriage of Figaro. And I remember it was around Christmas time, and I must have been 11. And I really didn't even know, but my father, he had great deal of interest in all forms of music, and he was a minister. And so I found it so fascinating that one day I was coming downstairs and I heard this beautiful music, and it sounded sometimes like my mom because she had this beautiful voice. But I said, no, that's not my mom. And I turned back down around on the stairs, and my dad was sitting there, and he was watching these people in these glorious costumes. And he said, my dad called everyone sweetheart. So sometimes sweetheart was the boys, sweetheart with the girls.
Yeah.
But, so he said, sweetheart, sit down with me. And he set me down and we watched The Marriage of Figaro.
Wow.
And I was captivated and hypnotized by their voices and the production. And I fell in love with the format of opera itself because I felt it was such a different form of artistry. One that has its own magic castle, so to speak. And it began my love and appreciation for that. And I fell in love with it ever since. And I asked him to explain that story. And when he began to explain it to me, it further encouraged my love and appreciation for it. So to have you with us here today, I'd like to delve into that piece, but I'd like to start with your story. Tell us where you hail from, your origin, what city you were born in, and a little bit about the beginning of your life.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Princeton, New Jersey, a little college town in the middle of New Jersey. And I actually still live there now. I didn't live here for a while, but then I wound up marrying a Princeton professor, and that brought me back. And I've since raised kids here. But yeah, I started, music was that was some of my earliest memories, which is strange because my parents were not musical. My dad loved music and he played music on records all the time, but neither of my parents were trained musicians or artists of any stripe. So they didn't have any musical instruments in the house. But I was always singing from my earliest memories are of just singing all the time and making up wordless melodies. And eventually, I begged my parents for a piano or a keyboard or something. I would go around to the neighbors' houses where we lived, and I would knock on their doors and ask to play their pianos by ear. And eventually we got my grandparents to send a piano to our house, and I began piano lessons around 6 or 7. And then that sort of started my journey with composing as well. But it was music just always felt like this sanctuary, this fascinating place where I wanted to spend all of my time. I was just fascinated by music, and I was thinking about music all the time. And I don't know. It felt like this now that I don't mean to answer your question too broadly, but the older I get, the more I believe in past lives.
Interesting.
a sense of reincarnation and inherited memory. And I have this strong feeling that I'm speaking this continued musical language of past ancestors in some strange way. I don't know.
I get that. I get
Yeah.
that. You mentioned sanctuary, and sanctuary itself is a spiritual term to some extent. That music was a sanctuary, and I find as a long history, music has been that place for me. Your selection of that word, it was a safe place for you.
Yeah, very much so. And it just felt like home in this way that I don't think I had words for it as a kid, but I remember I would often have this impulse to want to eat music. I wanted to like take a bite. I wanted to take bites out of it like an apple, like I would hear a
I
piece of
get that.
music. I would hear a piece of music or somebody would play some notes on an instrument, and I would have this immediate impulse to I wanted to bite it. And I don't know what that says, but I felt that way even when I first saw written music on a page, like a score, a piece of piano music, and I didn't know what it meant. But I was fascinated, and I wanted to learn that language. And I don't know, everything about music, it just felt like this other dimension, like life was one dimension and then music was another dimension. And I wanted to live in the musical dimension all the time. It was just this place that, it felt like spiritual sanctuary, home. I don't know, this place of awe and reverie. Yeah.
I don't know that that's too far off. I know oftentimes as an avid music fan, I do feel I'm transported, i.e., even the night I went to see your Hildegard. But I've always felt it is a coexisting dimension of sorts, because when you appreciate it and want to take a bite of it, so to speak. I too have tried to take a bite of music.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel I have found myself really transported, even in that night in watching The Marriage of Figaro with my dad. So in one element, sharing that present moment with my father, that itself was a moment of us joining as father and son. But in watching and hearing the voices in the performances, I felt removed. I felt I was transported into this whole other realm. And all I could hear were the notes, and I felt my body otherworldly. And I knew that music was that place. So it was other dimensional for me. And I think it's somewhat meant to be that way. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, music is one of the closest things to magic that I know of. I mean, it's like a drug in that it can change the way you think and feel, and I don't know anything else in life that does that for me quite the same way. I mean, oftentimes I'll get goosebumps from reading a novel or watching a film or even seeing a piece of art, but it's not quite the same, I don't know, physical response that I have to music. There's something about music that is so intensely visceral, and in my experience of it is so profound that sometimes it's almost incapacitating. Sometimes I almost can't handle it. A piece of music will come on the radio, and I'll be driving in the car with my kids, and some piece of music will come on that affects me a little too deeply, and I'll say, "Oh, I can't hear this," and they're like, "Mom, but it's just a piece of music," and I'm like, "No, it's incapacitating. I'll get too upset, or I'll remember this thing, or I don't know." But it's like, but I love that even when it's dark memories or evocations. It's the power of that is so fascinating to me. So I've always been fascinated by music, and it took me a long time to get there professionally because I had a lot of fear, but it's always been this.
What was that fear about? Let's backtrack on that. What was the fear about?
how to make a living, how to, you
Oh
know,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, that's fun.
there's that old thing, that
Yeah,
old
that
thing.
old thing,
How
trying
do
to pay
you,
the bills and so forth.
yeah, yeah. How to make a living, and also just, am I good enough? Like, there's so much self-doubt with art, as I know you have experience with art too, and I'm sure you've heard this from other artists, or maybe you've experienced this yourself, but it's such a big part of, you know, you've got the critic on one shoulder and then the cheerleader on the other. And
Yes.
I have a very intense self-critic. And so from a young age, I found it a very tortured process, being creative. Like, my self-critic was so intense a lot of the time that I would get very, very discouraged quite easily. And I often told myself that I had no right to be composing. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't, this or that. And I think also the fact that I had no female role models for composers when I was growing up. I didn't know of any female composers. Um, I mean, not a single one, because now but I'm 52. And so I grew up before the internet, and, and there was like, if I guess I could have gone to the library and looked up books about female composers, but I didn't think to do that. And so I think there was this subconscious idea that I didn't belong in the field, that it was only a field for, like, you know, dead white men. I didn't even know of really any, I mean,
I didn't expect that one.
I didn't even really know of any living composers when I was growing up. Like, I didn't even know about people like Philip Glass until I got to college. I'd barely heard of Stravinsky. I'd barely heard of composers who lived after, Debussy. My musical training, I studied cello and piano. And so all of my training was like Romantic era composers, or classical and romantic, but nobody from like the 20th century and beyond, really. So, or the 21st century. So yeah, it took me a long time to get there. I did not major in music in college. I studied psychology and sociology, thinking maybe that I would go into therapy or public policy. I wanted to do maybe social work, or I wasn't sure, but I felt like I wanted to try to make the world a better place. And music just seemed, it was my greatest love, but I was very afraid of it. I was very afraid that it just seemed too mysterious. I didn't know how to make a living. I didn't know what that world looked like. I thought maybe, okay, film scoring, like that was kind of the only modern day composition that I really knew of at the time. But going out to Hollywood and getting a job in film scoring, in the 90s seemed very unlikely. So anyway, it was a long road to get here. And I can tell that story or not, but I don't want to give you too long.
Please. But no, please. I would like you to tell that story, but I'm very curious. Did you, somewhat of a two-part question, what helped you to overcome that fear? Or, as I've experienced with some artists, they do walk into that fear and still continue to create, but because it's an ongoing, evolving situation, so I guess you would describe the fear as somewhat a motivator to continue to create, and that's what keeps it new. So what was there a moment when you overcame that fear, or do you find yourself existing somewhat as a creative in the torture of that, and it's still it births some of your creativity?
Yeah, that's a great question, Seth. I do still have the fear all the time, every day, but there was an initial moment where I think the fear was outweighed or overshadowed by this inability to do anything else. Like, I got to a point in my mid-20s. So after college, I moved to New York, and I took a job working at the Center for Reproductive Law and Policy, which was a nonprofit law firm that specialized in women's reproductive rights. And it was an amazing place to work, a great job, great people. I thought maybe I would apply to law school at this point. but I had friends from college who were doing off Broadway theater, like experimental theater, and they asked me to do music for their productions because they knew, that I did music on my own. Like I'd always been composing on my own, but I just never really showed it to anybody except my friends once in a while. And I had never had a composition lesson, anything like that. So,
Oh,
but
wow.
nevertheless, but yeah, some friends of mine were like, "Oh, can you write us some music for this performance or this theater piece?" And so I did that, and I was working at nights and on the weekends to make that music happen. And I found that it ignited this intense happiness in me and passion and joy that was missing in my law work. I just felt like, oh, this is what it means to be alive. This is what it means to love what you do. And the contrast was so stark. I mean, I enjoyed my law job, but it was just like a job in a lot of ways. It wasn't a passion. And when I felt the way that I did writing the music for the theater productions, it made me realize, like, okay, you have to get over your fears, Sarah, and do this, because life is too short to not know, this joy and this pleasure on a daily basis. Even if it comes with a lot of fear, even if it comes with a lot of self-doubt, there's still this sense of spiritual rightness of like, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm put on this earth to do, because this is a depth, a profundity of joy and just wrestling, not always even joy, but like wrestling with stuff that really matters, that makes you feel alive. That feeling was so profound. And so that's what set me off on this course to, apply to graduate school in music. And that took a while because, as I mentioned, I didn't have a bachelor's. So it was a long road, but I eventually started graduate school at the age of 30, and which was relatively late. And that set my career in motion finally.
Now, you mentioned, I want to circle back to that, but you mentioned not being able to find female composers. Did you eventually find a couple that really kind of helped initiate you into this area that you found really spoke, that some people can learn about themselves?
Absolutely, yeah. So composers like Meredith Monk, Julia Wolfe, Kaya Sariaho. These are women of very different aesthetics, different from my own and different from each other, but they were out there doing this thing of writing music that was really interesting and adventurous and spoke to me in different ways, and that was really exciting to me. Boy, yeah, and at the same time, though, I also drew strength from a lot of non-classical female role models too, but
Such as?
such as PJ Harvey, back in
Oh,
the
yep.
90s, early Liz Phair, Joni Mitchell, even
Oh, why you
some
say my girl right there? Joni Mitchell.
Joni Mitchell. I mean, she was huge for me growing up. Like that,
Yeah.
I would say some of my earliest like compositions that I'm proud of in high school were like a mix of Joni Mitchell and early Debussy. That was sort of, those were my two biggest influences in high school. But yeah, just, to get back to your question, I think just realizing that there were people of all different backgrounds, making music in this more sort of adventurous, modern compositional way was really exciting to me. And having them as role models was really, really helpful and really instructive. So yeah, that made a big difference. And then just learning about the vast world of new music that I hadn't known about. I mean, there's so many composers out there doing lots of really interesting different things. So that was this whole world that I knew nothing about. And that got me really excited. Yeah.
So by 30, circling back to that, by 30 and beginning this journey, I'd like to address some of the challenge of the fear of that. When you knew or began to know this is where you want to go, what was the biggest push or was there a particular moment because you kind of touched on it, that you said, this is it for me. I know this, even though I'm in this sphere, this is it for me. Was there a particular memory that you have that struck that?
Yeah, well, I remember I remember writing to my boss at the law office and saying, like, I need a little more time to work on the music. But I know that I've, already used up all of my personal days, and you don't have to pay me. Can I just take some unpaid days off to finish the music? And she said, no, a job doesn't work that way. And I was like, oh, right, right. A job doesn't work that way. Okay. I mean, this was not so much like a spiritual turning point, but like a figure or a literal one where I realized, like, oh, I need to make this my job because this is what I want to spend my time on. And so I need to find a way to turn this into something I can try to make money doing, or something that I can sustain myself, at least in some way that gives me enough time to work on music. So at that point, I wasn't even sure if I would be able to make a living as a composer, but I thought maybe what I'll do is just wait tables and a lot. And so that's what I did. I quit my law job and I started working as a waitress, and so that I had more time to compose. And I took lots of music classes so that I could apply to graduate school. And then, eventually, yeah, I wound up there. But it was this whole time, it was this feeling of like, now I know what it feels like to really love what you do, when you lose track of all time, right? Like when you're working on something
Yes.
and time just evaporates and
Yes.
hours pass
Yes.
and you forget to eat and you don't know,
Yes.
you don't notice the sun going down, and all of a sudden it's midnight and you're still on cloud nine. You're having the best time working on something. And that was the greatest feeling. And I just thought, okay, I this is what I want my life to be like. I need to find a way to have more days where I feel this way. So it was really just putting one foot in front of the other, trying to figure out how to make that path happen. And I think going to graduate school really helped a lot, of course, because it taught me an enormous amount about the career, about the field. I made a lot of connections with other musicians and figured out what a life on this path would look like. And so, yeah. And then from there, I was fortunate to have some commissions materialize out of graduate school, and sort of one thing led to another. But I think for me, really the portal to the career was graduate school, was getting there and learning about the field, making connections, all of that. But yeah, sort of one
So
foot
you
in front of the other. Yeah.
so that's what I was going to pardon me, one foot in front of the other. Your first full composition, what would tell us about that story?
Well, do you mean like when I was a kid or when I was older?
During the graduate school, right? During the graduate school time, and
Okay, yeah.
you came up with your first full composition.
Yeah. So that was so I started a first graduate school program in New York at NYU. It wound up not being the right fit for me, but I was there for a year and a half, and I met this wonderful composer named Justin Delajoyo. He was my first mentor. And, up until that point, I'd written a bunch of music as a kid, hadn't really showed it to anyone. And I mentioned to you that I had written some music for theater, but my chops were so crude, like I really didn't know much technique. I'd played piano and cello, my whole life, but I really did not know a lot about composing. And so when I got in with my teacher, Justin, my first composition teacher, he had me write a piece for piano. And that was really interesting because I had to, with a lot of my other pieces, I would stop and start and I wouldn't be on a deadline, but this was like the first time that I was on a deadline and had to write a full piece and, have it performed. And I was terrified. It was really nerve-wracking. And very scary. And I felt like I needed so much guidance and reassurance all the time, a lot of like emotional handholding that I was doing the right thing. And only a teacher can only give you that so much. You sort of need to find that emotional handholding in yourself, you know, and that was an interesting learning process, just to really have to let go at times of that self-critic in order to meet the deadline. But nevertheless, I loved that experience. And, you know, from there, I wrote a few more piano pieces, and then I wrote a string quartet. And I was fortunate to I entered the string quartet in a competition, and I was fortunate to win this competition. And so that led to some performances. And that gave me that gave me some confidence that I was, you know, I don't know, not crazy to try to make a living trying to do this. But at the same time, I still felt like, you know, I was 30 years old, and I was at Yale. This was when I finally got to grad school proper. And I was surrounded by fellow students who were like 22 and had been studying classical music since they were in utero. And, you know, their parents had taken them to the opera and the symphony. And that was not my background. Like, you know, as I mentioned, I was not a music major. My parents were not musical. There was so
And
much.
by this point, if I may interject very quickly, by this
Please,
point,
please.
had you had your children? Had you had children by this point?
No. I had my kids at 35 and 38. So a few years later. But yeah, but I was older, you know, and when you're 30 and the other kids are like 22, 23, that seems like a big age difference, you know?
Yeah.
So I felt kind of like the continuing ed lady, you know, like going back to school and you know, the other students are like going to keg parties and stuff. And I felt like, oh, I'm too old for this. Like, you know, I really felt, you know, and now looking back, like 30 is so young, but when you're 30 and everyone else is 22, you feel so old. And I just had this feeling of like, oh, am I too old to catch up and do this as a career? You know, am I too old to do this? I have so much to catch up on. I also was the only woman in the program, I should mention. It was all guys. So for my first 2 years, I was at Yale for 3 years. And my first 2 years, I was the only woman. And not only the only female student, but there were no female teachers either in the faculty. So it was like all guys all the time and me. And that was really challenging for me, because you feel like you're representing your gender all the time, you know, like, and that's too much pressure. And there's also, there were just a lot of things about that were very uncomfortable for me. So that was a whole other set of challenges to negotiate at that point in time. But yeah, you know, I felt like a fish out of water in many, many ways. And it took me a while to sort of feel really comfortable in this profession. And I think it's an ongoing process. But I think to segue sort of into the Hildegard conversation, I think this is part of what drew me to write this opera about her, because my experiences early on in the field as a woman, you know, feeling so uncomfortable and out of place. You know, Hildegard's story was 900 years ago, and yet many things haven't changed that much, you know? So, so I think there were a lot of aspects of her story that I could relate to, even though by all arguments, my situation was a million times easier than hers. Nevertheless, there were aspects of her story that resonated with me on a personal level because of my own experiences as the only woman in the room, oftentimes.
It's very interesting and a great segue into Hildegard itself, because there are so many levels that I think that this particular opera, your composition, touches on. The isolation of a woman who has foresight and has to take courageous steps to speak her voice and feel strong about it. In addition to that, there is a romanticism that the story I saw that was definitely a wowzer. And And I will tell you, you know, without giving away too much, they're
Sure.
like, oh, oh.
Oh, you mean like the love story?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. That great. You know, I was in attendance with my Val, and we just both because she hadn't been exposed to it. I had been exposed to Hildegard, as I mentioned, but the element of the love story definitely, to me, it fits so perfectly because I think, you know, you are a trailblazer, and trailblazers oftentimes, uh, it's hard to find the square hole that you fit into because we're
Mhm.
constantly being put into circular holes.
Mhm.
And so, but that is the soul of the creative. It is that you always are trying to fit into you're a square trying to fit into a circular hole. And Hildegard, being surrounded by men who were saying no, 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 and then her love, as I said, I don't want to give away too much, but
Oh, it's okay.
oh, okay. And her love. Oh, I don't believe I'm forgetting her name for
Ricardus. Ricardus?
yes, Ricardus. And Ricard, yes, Ricardus. And her love for Ricardus, it because even in looking back and reading on the story, to the hidden nature of what that could look like, and then still trying to say, I have these visions, I have these interpretations. I want to let you know, in light of all of this, that that story in itself was so breathtakingly in depth. And
Mm.
the shock value is one thing for some people, but you're enthralled by what it took for that courage. And I often find creatives, it takes a lot of courage. And going back to our fear conversation earlier, in spite of fear, to take the courage as you did, as being the only woman in the room as a composer. So in Hildegard's story, I didn't want to forget that point of, oh, so yes. So share with people in a synopsis Hildegard and who she was and why she was so courageous for the time that she was doing. I know the story, but I'd like our viewers to hear why it was she was such a courageous person.
Yeah, sure. So Hildegard von Bingen she was born in 1098, so right at the start of the 12th century, and she was somebody who she grew up in the Catholic Church in the sense that she was tithed to the church by her parents between the age of 8 and 12. And she grew up as an anchorite in the church, meaning that she was walled up in a single room cell with another young girl, as was a tradition at the time. She grew up having these incredible visions, and she would see God and see, a biblical imagery and these fantastical visions, but she didn't tell anybody about them until she got older. Eventually, she was able to leave that one room cell and became magistra, which was like the head of the women, the small group of women who were at this monastery. I should mention this was in Germany. This was a Benedictine monastery called Disi Bodenberg, and anyway, around the time that she was able to get out of that one room cell, she found the courage in herself to tell the men that worked with her that she'd been having these visions. And she had this one particular vision where she said that God commanded her to speak and write what she saw and heard. In other words, to publish, to write down what she saw and heard. And this was extraordinary because as a woman, first of all, women were not allowed to be educated in that day and an age, and a woman was basically just seen as property, right? Like they were domestic property unless they were in a monastery, but even then they had a very low status. So Hildegard, as an uneducated woman, for her to come forward and say, I'm having these visions, they've been sent by God and we need to write them down. That was just completely unheard of. No woman had ever done that before. And yet she kept, her biography that she wrote talks about how she had taken to her bed for 6 months because she kept telling God she couldn't do this. This was unheard of and impossible and it wouldn't work and she would be excommunicated or killed or whatever. And killed is probably was less likely than. They didn't really burn women at the stake until the 1300s, but she was nevertheless very afraid that she would be banished to the woods and die a pariah if she were to come forth and tell them that she'd had these visions. And yet God kept telling her that she had to. So eventually she risked everything. This is why her story is so fascinating to me, because she risked the only life that she knew in order to come forward and ask for the right to write down these visions. And in order to do that, she had to go through this series of steps to prove herself. She had to share some manuscripts with first the abbot and then the archbishop, and then it went to the Pope. And eventually, amazingly, the Pope granted her the right to write down these visions. Now, part of the reason why she was able to do this is because she was very clever and savvy, and she took advantage of this loophole in the Bible that said that, God shall choose the weak to shame the strong. God will sometimes exalt the weak and the humble in order to shame the strong. And so this was a point in time where there was a lot of corruption in the church and a lot of strife, and people were buying and selling church offices. There was just a whole lot of corruption. So Hildegard comes along and says, God has chosen me because I'm an uneducated woman, and he hasn't chosen you because we are in such a corrupt time and place, and he's using me to make an example. This is, the fact of my lack of education is a testament to the fact that this must be God sent. These visions must be from God, because how else would I know them? So because of this, the Pope granted her the right to write these visions down, and she became the first woman in the history of the Catholic Church to be published, which was extraordinary. But she also was a composer, and she wrote a lot of gorgeous music. And in fact, her music is one of the largest surviving bodies of work from the Middle Ages. She also wrote the largest surviving body of writing in Latin. Like, she wrote so many books about theology and medicine and natural history and botany and astrology, astronomy. So she was just this extraordinary figure who accomplished way more than most people do in an average lifetime. But for a woman to have achieved what she did, considering her lack of formal education, considering her lack of social status, all of that was incredibly fascinating to me. And I wanted to know, how she summoned the courage to do all of that. So it was fascinating to read her letters, her biography, her autobiography, where she talks about her constant self-doubt and anxiety, and how she never knew a moment without anxiety. And I found that very interesting, because she often comes off as a woman of great confidence.
Confidence, absolutely.
Yeah. But
that goes back to what you were saying earlier. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
That comes back to some of what your experience was as well. I see the connectivity there, and working through that fear and still coming across with confidence. And I think sometimes a creative like yourself, like Hildegard, you have nothing else to do but be present with the creative process. That's why it's somewhat of the torture that you mentioned, because it is an overwhelming thing, that it is your person, that you must follow that spiritual vocation.
Yeah, it's larger than you. And the more you try to fight it, I think maybe this is a better answer to the question you asked earlier. Like, I think it's almost like, fighting a strong creative urge is so difficult. It's like repressing a part of yourself, and I think anytime we repress any important part of ourselves, we suffer and we feel a void in our lives, and I think it can manifest physically. Either you get depressed, or you get sick, or you have chronic pain, or anytime we repress a strong desire, I think, or repress an important part of ourselves, that can happen. So for me, it was realizing in my early 20s that I'd been repressing this drive to make music. And, Yeah. So I think, this is something that I've tried to emphasize with my kids is like listening to yourself and listening to what you love and what excites you, what motivates you. Those are the things we're supposed to be following, right? Like those are the bliss, the love is what we're supposed to be following. And anytime we shut that down or tamp it down or try to push it away, it's unhealthy for us. And that could be art, that could be sexual orientation, that could be political or whatever. I just think it's so important to listen to ourselves, listen to who we
Absolutely.
are and honor it. Yeah.
I agree with that. Now, during the time when you were inspired to compose the Hildegard opera, what was going on during your life?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I started thinking about this opera a long time ago.
So,
Yeah, it's embarrassing how long it took me to get here. Again, I guess that's sort of Hildegardian in the sense that I kept putting it off and having all this fear and doubt about it. But
why embarrassing? I'm curious, Sarah. Why you say embarrassing?
because I should, I mean, I don't like that. I'm not proud of how much fear has controlled me,
Mm.
in life.
Oh, I get that. Yeah, I get
Yeah,
that.
I think
We do
there's
that. We do that. I think we do
yeah,
that. And I'm so glad I think we're delving into the fear aspect, which I think people need to hear as a conversation, because it is a very real thing that can be very restrictive and prohibitive and
absolutely.
debilitating. And I think it's important to discuss the fear element of this as a motivator to other creators who do experience this fear in the process of creativity. And
Yes,
that it is a very real thing. And I'm glad that it wasn't intended. You and I had spoken, but this portion wasn't intended. But I feel it's very substantial that in the creative process, you will experience fear, but you continue to move forward. And I think I'm just glad we're in this area of this conversation.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's such an important thing to talk about because there is so much fear with creativity and with any kind of sticking your neck out to say something that somebody else hasn't said or to I don't even mean artistically, but I mean even in a daily conversation. Like we just have so much fear all the time that holds us back from sharing our point of view. And for so many reasons. I mean, we learn early on that we want to protect ourselves from rejection or from criticism, but those impulses they grow too intense and too well honed, and then they keep us from doing things that we love that would make us happy,
Yes, yes, yes,
and also things that would make, frankly, the world a better place. I think the
yes.
world would be a better place if people felt less inhibited to say their point of view and to contribute their point of view. I mean, I think we all have such unique things to say, and I fiercely believe that we are all creative. I really believe that.
I do too. I do
Everybody,
too.
yeah, I really believe that
But
we all have that. This
I do
these
too. I just think it is this fear thing. I think it really can be debilitating, but all of us have that creativity. I think we are created. We are in utero, so to speak, as creators. But fear can become such a thing. Hence, why
yes,
we have to push past it. Or sometimes, as I've talked to some of my mentors in the past, we become aware of it and present of it, but trek ahead.
yes, exactly. And I think about that moment in Hildegard's life where she was, bedridden for 6 months, thinking like she kept telling God, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't tell them I'm having these visions. And then she finally got to a point where she couldn't take it anymore. And she took that next step and she confessed that she'd been having these visions. And then from there, things, moved forward. But it's that one step that she took, where she went to her friend Volmar and confessed that she'd been having these visions. That one step was the rest of her life, but that one step took so much courage. And I think sometimes we get to a point where we're so beaten down that taking a scary, courageous step is the only choice. It's either that or we completely shut down and die, And I think for me, that was the choice to make music ultimately, because I felt like I wasn't happy. And I finally realized that I wouldn't be happy ever doing anything else unless I did music. But yeah, fear, I mean, it's a daily battle for me. I still have a lot of anxiety all the time, a lot of self-doubt. I'm married to another composer, and we spend a lot of time. Sorry, my dogs are barking.
That's okay. Mine were a little bit ago. I said, "Oh, Sarah's gonna hear my dogs. She's gonna say like, who
I
let the
love
dogs out, dude?"
I love dogs. I love dog
I do
songs, but
too.
ours are a little crazy right now. Okay. Um yeah, so I mean, I try to tell my kids this all the time, to fight fear. You really have to push back against fear. Um it's not always there to protect us. Like, it's an overactive protective mechanism, and it's overdeveloped, and we need to push past it. We need to, you know, just tell it to step off, you know? And so I was trying to give the PG version of that, but yeah, you know, we're
How
on a
about you can do the
podcast.
PG? You can do the PG-13. We're at least PG-13.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure what that would be, but yeah. Yeah, I think, oh, but the reason I brought up my husband is because sometimes I think that that's why we married each other, because we were really good at talking about music and helping each other through our mental blocks, or giving each other courage to keep pursuing this idea, and not given to fear or anxiety. It's a big part of our marriage, actually, is talking about music and talking through these issues. So interesting.
I'm fascinated. Your husband, you mentioned him, his compositions and or his creativity. Do you two find a somewhat of a forget what you got synchronistic effect to encourage each other in some of your creative process?
Yes, very much so. We're always playing our music for each other that we're working on, which is, in our line of work, you mock up your ideas on these computer software programs, and it sounds terrible. Like, the audio playback is not at all, it doesn't sound like a real orchestra. But we're often writing orchestral music with these programs, and playing it for each other, on headphones, and talking about, this section is frustrating me, the counterpoint isn't working, or, I don't know what to do here. And it's really, really helpful. It's like having a live-in, I don't know, just kind of like a creative therapist in a way, just.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
Which is,
I
I
like
think,
that.
what a good teacher is. If you're fortunate enough to have a good teacher, or a good mentor, that's the role that they should play, is like helping encourage your best instincts, and help you, fight the fear and fight the self-criticism, and talk through your problems. So yeah, that's a big part of, how we, I don't know, we have a lot of fun talking about music together, and we do spend a lot of time sort of helping each other through our creative situations. Yeah, frustrations.
I really like that.
Yeah.
Now, pardon me. Going back to Hildegard, the
Yeah.
love story between her and Ricardus, where the dynamic of that, I'm curious, or the origin of that. Can you
Yeah.
speak about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that historians speculate about. We don't know
I
for
noticed
sure.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I noticed that. I didn't want to cut you off. I
No,
noticed
no.
when I was looking back at that, there were a couple of different opinions about whether or not it was romanticized, or if it was
Yeah.
this great mentor protege type of thing, or sisterhood. And I'm curious. I'm going to be silent. I want to hear what you thought about that.
Oh, no, 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 not at all. I love having this conversation with you. It's great. So please feel free to
Thank you.
interject anytime. But
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, who knows? I personally doubt that they had any kind of physically realized kind of, who knows? But Hildegard was such an intensely, she'd grown up in the Benedictine tradition since she was a kid. And that whole tradition is about being married to God and honoring God in this really profound way where you're not supposed to have close friendships with other nuns. You're not supposed to be really close with anyone but God. And I think that Hildegard respected that tremendously. That said, there's no doubt when you look through their letters and their correspondence that Hildegard had very deep feeling for Ricardus. Whether we want to call that romantic or platonic is really dependent on the person. But when Ricardus's mother sent Ricardus away to a different abbey, this was devastating for Hildegard. And Hildegard, at this point in her career, had enough political clout that she was able to actually kind of abuse that clout. And she wrote letters to everybody under the sun, asking them to help her bring Ricardus back. And she kind of abused her privilege in a lot of ways. And it made a lot of, like she wrote to the Pope, she wrote to archbishops and basically anybody with any power. And a lot of them, you could tell by their responses that they thought it was not a good look for her. They thought that she was out of place to be requesting this. And, she wrote this one letter to Ricardus where she talks about how much she loved Ricardus, how deeply, and loved everything about her to the point that everyone around her was saying, "What are you doing?" So I think that was the line that, if nothing else, points to the fact that people were taking notice of how extreme, and how intense
and their intimacy.
Yeah, and I think we don't know what role Ricardus played in the transcription of Hildegard's visions, although apparently she was in the room some of the time and helped in some way. So since this opera was a work of historical fiction, there were many liberties that I took in telling the story, where I kind of embellished things to make it more dramatic and more...
it was. It was.
You want to make an opera not just dramatic, but like resonant with a broad number of people, or as many people as possible. And so, I wanted to touch on larger themes in life that I find interesting, and that I think need more discussion in opera, which is to say, like the empowerment of women, women's creativity, women helping each other. So I thought it would be interesting to cast Ricardus as the artist who illustrated Hildegard's vision, since we don't know who that actually was. And that way they could develop this partnership that then becomes more, deeper and more profound and intimate. And, I think that if Ricardus had been a man and there were these letters that existed, that the same exact letters and, the same kind of the things that they expressed to each other, if that had been with a man, if Ricardus had been a man, I think there's no question that people would have assumed that there was a romantic relationship. But because it's two women and because that's not looked, well upon in the Catholic Church, there's been controversy about it. And I just thought that was interesting. Like I thought, well, if
very much.
If this weren't something that was looked down upon, or if this weren't a taboo, would people be as hesitant to speculate that they loved each other? And so yeah, I wanted to explore that relationship. And I also think that we need more examples of LGBTQ love stories in general, but particularly in opera, where we just don't have much of that. And boy, I mean, yeah, there's yeah.
I got to tell you,
art for me, it's really important to, I don't know, I believe very much in having art tell us stories that can lift us up and make the world a better place. And
yes.
For me, the world would be a better place if we were more accepting of our differences and more tolerant. And, I really see, as I think many people do, I see homosexuality as a beautiful part of the human spectrum and not something that is shameful in any way or should be shameful or shouldn't be accepted by any religion. I mean, to me, that's just crazy. It's like being left-handed versus right-handed, you know? Not as many people may be gay, but that doesn't make it any less normal, you know? So for me, it's really important to see stories that lift up, that help us lift each other up in ways that make us all feel accepted, and help us realize that every expression of the human spectrum is a beautiful part of the human spectrum, and that it's something to be, cherished, not to feel shameful about, but to be celebrated. So
we found it interesting that it took that turn. It was a dramatic shift, but I say aided to it was the stage production was so incredible, Sarah. Compliments to the production value. Oh my gosh. It added to the storyline of their love, and then Volmar, his portion of it. So the backdrop scenery, and even in the visions, there's so many different elements that were so profoundly assistant and supportive to their storyline, in the expression of their love and the visions was breathtaking. And I know Val's going to kill me. Well, my partner who went with me, she cried, and I didn't know, because I was so enthralled with the performances already. And I look over and she's tearing up, and then the lady next to her is tearing up. And I said, "Wait, what happened?" she's gonna kill me. But she said, "I just feel so awful for them that they had to keep this quiet and secret." And she was overwhelmed with emotion. And meanwhile, I was trying to go like this. Oh man, I hope they stop crying so I don't have to start crying.
Oh, that's amazing.
But they enjoyed it so much, and it was so moving that when I say the stage production value on that, and then the songs were just so incredible, Sarah, just so compliment to you how you did that, because I didn't notice them crying because I was hearing them sing, especially when Ricardus's portion came up on that, and I was just hypnotized. And so as I was coming out of it to check and see, then I'm seeing them tear up, and I'm like, "Oh, great, this is fantastic now."
Oh, that means a lot to me. It really does.
Well, it was that poignant, Sarah, I got to tell you, just that poignant and beautifully productive.
Thank you.
I want to absolutely, in talking about that.
Yeah.
So I feel that due to their love, I felt that Hildegard, some of this was restrictive and or scary, because her dedication to God and being a woman in this situation, I felt some of that contributed in the story to why they were frowned upon, and or we just gave you this opportunity, woman, to transcribe your visions, and now your intimacy with Ricardus, hey, you stop that. And so I felt that some of the elements of that was a betrayal to the church, so to speak, and a betrayal to her marriage to God. And I think that's why some of it felt so much more rich with the texture of that was a part of it, because she did devote herself in somewhat this marriage to the church and to God. And so to have this intimate person that she loved so much, the conflict that was there, I thought contributed to some of the trepidation and or how can we do this? She recognized, and so I felt like that contributed to it. If you can speak on that a little.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, so Hildegard, I wanted to get at the complexity of her feelings for Ricardus. Like, I don't think that she had an easy time with her feelings for Ricardus. Who knows, how much she even really acknowledged them. I think she knew that she cared for her deeply, but I think she told herself that it was a platonic love, or maybe just a sisterly love, or whatever. I mean, we'll never know, right? But in my heart of hearts, I think that she had a lot of repressed feelings about this. And I think she was embarrassed by the ways that other people were looking askance at her relationship with Ricardus, she also notoriously wrote some very homophobic things about gay people in general and how they were, the work of the devil and going to hell and all this stuff. But to be fair, anyone who wrote and was published by the Catholic Church at that point in time had to say that. I mean, that was like basically the same as crossing yourself and saying, I believe in one God. You also had to say, I believe that man and women, a marriage is between a man and a woman, and love is between a man and a woman, and whatever, the 10 Commandments. It was a big part of towing the line of the Catholic Church philosophy to decry any sort of homosexuality. So I think Hildegard had to do that in order to be taken seriously by the church, regardless of what she may herself have believed was right. But we'll never know what she really, really believed. And I thought the tension between what, she would have inherited as a sense of right and wrong, the tension between that and her potential feelings for Ricardus, that was very interesting to me. And so that, that's one of the things that I think opera can do the best, is to get at really complicated, complex feelings, and music can express things that words can't. And so I wanted to find a way to sort of tackle a lot of the complexity of her feelings for Ricardus, the joy, the love, but also the shame and the confusion.
And the torture, the sheer torture, because
totally.
it tortured her. And that's also a part of the story that was so enriching to experience, because you can see, and even in some of the writings I read, I feel there's hints of that, elements of that. And she was tortured by the intimacy that she was feeling and the closeness, but also that she's experiencing this great revelatory spiritual experience. She's present with these visions that are saying this. So you had the two competing, and both are spiritual. The love and intimacy she's feeling is spiritual, and then being given these visions. And so she's caught in the middle. She's tortured by being caught in the middle of her own human experience, having such great contributing emotional things happening and going on. And then that, along with fighting the church to say, I have these gifts to do this. And I felt like that was one of the elements that you touched on so superbly. And compliments to the actors and performers. My gosh, they were incredible voices, incredible performances. They really, you saw them experience those whole things. I couldn't say enough about it. That they were really, they were absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
That is amazing. Yeah, thank you. And what you just said about, you really just hit at the crux of the opera so beautifully just then. I love what you said about that, the torture and the spiritual. I mean, that combination of, being caught in between these various manifestations of divine experience. Like on the one hand, visions, on the other hand, love, which is also a divine spiritual experience. And so yeah, absolutely. That was.
And I think we as human beings, we contend with that often. We're looking forward to this divine relationship, or developing what our spiritual relationship would be. And yet we also experience the loves of our lives with an intimate partner, our children. So, and then you're having these encounters. I feel like that would be extremely a torturous middle place to be. And how do you express that in this human experience? I felt you conveyed that. And again, compliments to the actors, because I felt like they really demonstrated that torture, in particular, who played Ricardus and Hildegard. I felt it was magnificently done and expressed that feeling of torture with these components happening all at the same time, and still having to be a vessel for what you're experiencing. Still have to be going back to you, still having to create, still having to produce what your artistry is and/or your spiritual gift. It was just incredibly beautifully put.
Oh, thank you so much. That's amazing. I feel like you really understand this opera so beautifully. And
I told you, Sarah Chick. Yo, Sarah, it was just really well done.
Thank you so much.
I just felt you. It's absolutely my pleasure. I felt it was crystal clear to me, and maybe that's because, as I told you earlier, I'm a romantic to my heart, but I'm also, I feel that we are coming into this awareness and evolution of our spirituality globally.
Yeah.
There's some elements to that, and I try to express that in my daily life, to being good to people, to loving more, and I feel we're all trying to let more of that portion of ourselves come out more. And so I
Mhm.
live in that place in all the work that I've done and in my life, and I find myself empathic about that. And I felt you have that same sense as a creative, that you're in touch with those feelings, and it came out in the artistry of Hildegard. Just to me, it was just very clear. And then again, then I had to hurry up and man up and straighten up, and they're crying. Oh, so,
Uh, that's amazing. I love it. I love it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
No, that's
I just
that's
felt you demonstrated that so well.
oh, thank you so much. That really, really means a lot to me. It really does. That was everything that I was hoping for. So that's like the best review I could possibly receive. Thank you.
Truly, truly my pleasure. And I can't say enough about the performance. I'm very curious also. So Sarah, were you a part of the selection process for those who performed in it, or was that outside of you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was part of the casting process to a degree. And then Beth Morrison, who's the producer, she was sort of the overarching head of casting. It was sort of a collaborative process. But ultimately, I was thrilled with everybody. Like there were certain folks that I didn't know, that she recommended, but it all worked out beautifully. I was very happy in the end.
For sure.
And yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to put together an independent opera. This is not a typically well-funded endeavor. And, unless you're Puccini or, one of those composers, those are the big budget operas, right? But otherwise, if you're a living composer working today, chances are you have a very small budget to work with. And so I just felt incredibly grateful that we were able to put this production together on this tiny budget and find these incredibly gifted performers. They did an extraordinary job. Everybody did. The cast and crew, yeah, they were amazing.
Really, really were.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And
we had our share of troubles behind the scenes, but it all somehow got to the finish line. Yeah.
Sarah, explain some of the funding process, or what, nothing too private,
Sure.
but you mentioned as an independent, putting this on independently, and it's not one of the larger known. What's some of that process like for some of our innovators who might be interested in some of the struggles it took for you to get to the place to put this on?
Oh, wow. Yeah. No, I'm glad you asked about that because, the arts, particularly right now with this administration, there's been so many cuts to the NEA and to other grants organizations who are having to sort of run triage to help everybody else out who's lost their NEA funding. And so, but even before this administration, it's been hard in this country to make new opera happen, very hard. It's an extremely expensive endeavor, as you can imagine. There's sets, there's costumes, there's, the cast, there's the performers, the orchestra, whatever. We only had, 9 instrumentalists and 8 singers. And still, it was incredibly challenging raising the money to make this production happen. Beth Morrison, who's the producer, is to be seriously commended. She is the head behind Beth Morrison Productions. She raises all this money and makes these productions happen, with the assistance of, in this case, LA Opera. But Beth really did the lion's share of the work for this. And, she manages to put these things together, these passionate casts and crews on these shoestring budgets. But it's, which is not to say that it's without a lot of stress. I mean, it was extremely stressful behind the scenes. There were things that we wanted to have happen with the set that couldn't happen at the very last minute. You may recall how noisy the bed was rolling across the stage.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah, no, that was like,
it wasn't that bad. It wasn't
was
that
really
bad.
bad. It was really bad. And it was called out in some reviews as it should have been, but we literally couldn't get the proper casters. Like, it was like a matter of days, and somehow the order for the bed casters fell through. This is a classic thing that happens with independent opera, where, like, you are running on the shoestring budget. Everybody is part-time and underpaid, and everyone's working on multiple productions and trying to make all these things happen at the last minute. And invariably things go wrong and they don't work out. So we had a number of situations like this where, we were flying by the seat of our pants, like praying that things would work out. There was like some grommets that broke on a kabuki drop and during one of the productions. And, this is what happens with low budget independent opera when you're working on a shoestring. So it's nerve-wracking and scary. And, people are in it for the love, not for the money. But, you sometimes have to make compromises. And, in our case, like, we had to hire a cast that was New York based because we're doing the performance in New York. And we're doing the performance in New York in January. And so we were planning to go to LA first, but Beth needed to run most of the rehearsals in New York ahead of time in order to save money. So we had to have a New York based cast that we then flew out to LA. And then, and then, you're finding housing for people in LA, but it was cheaper than, getting two different casts or doing an LA cast and rehearsing. So it's the money is a constant issue. And it's always like a white knuckled crawl to the finish line where you're wondering, are we going to make it? Like, do we have enough money to make this happen? Nobody is getting paid what they should be getting paid. And so, there were some casting issues with that, for instance, where we thought we had a certain person, but then the fee didn't work. And so it's all very nerve-wracking and stressful. But everybody's involved because at the end of the day, they love it and they want to be there because they love making new opera and new theater and trying to tell an interesting story and move people,
Yes.
But I think
Certainly.
if the arts in this country had more funding, I think it would just make all the difference in the world. We would not be in this position where so little new opera is getting made, which is the case by and large. Very little new opera gets made because it's just too expensive, and people would rather be home watching Netflix, than going to see a new opera. I mean, and I get it. Like, I love Netflix. Don't get me wrong. So, I mean, we all do. It's like, it's hard to leave your house. It's hard to leave your house, especially following COVID. We all got used to being home and, not having to interface with other humans and not having to leave the comfort of our couch and our, cozy den. So I get it. But at the same time, it's transformative, the power of the theater. And I think this is something that I keep hearing from people. Like, I have some friends that I went to college with who came to see this, and they never go see opera. And they were like, oh, wow, I didn't know I liked opera. Now I want to go see more opera. But I think it's because sadly, these are art forms that we associate with like a museum, with eras long gone by, times, 200 years ago or something. So most people don't really think of even going to see an opera. Most people don't even think of going to see Broadway. Like, it's something that, Broadway is that's a bad example next to opera, but just saying, like, you know what I mean? People,
I do actually.
Don't go see, like, a lot of people don't go see live art anymore, live performance.
Yes. I think that's very sad. I get it. We had this big transformation with COVID, but the experience of being around those productions, opera, for me, I'm glad the way you put it. They think of it as an ancient art form. And who goes to do that except the very wealthy of some sort? But
Yeah.
the experience of being out there and having this experience and art, which are the two of my favorite things. Well, both are art, but it's just such a glorious experience to be
Yeah.
around other people and to be transplanted in this whole other dimension is such a wonderful experience. And I feel somewhat, I know there's older people than us, but somewhat sad that is a piece that's missing from people's shared life experience to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
And I'm part of what I'm hoping with this interview as well with you. I know for me it was transformative, and I know for my guest it was transformative. I'm hoping that more people will not only look into Hildegard but look into Sarah Kirkland
Oh,
and look into other composers and see that there's so much other beautiful experiences we can have within the artist industry. And I'm hoping more people who watch this will see and get that experience.
I really hope so too. Yeah. I mean, I think the real difference is like the risk taking, to get back to something that we talked
Yes,
about early on. When you're in live theater, you don't have the benefit of editing, or anything. Like,
yes,
people are out there emoting, in real time, and making choices that could go wildly wrong. They're taking these enormous
yes,
risks, and that is what is so exciting, I think, about live
yes,
theater is the fact that people are putting their hearts out there, and every night, every performance is different from the one prior.
yes,
They're
yes,
especially in something like with new opera, where you've got only 4 performances. It's not like Broadway, where it's every night and they maybe get a little cynical, or it becomes a little bit rote or mechanical. This is like, you have 4 performances and you have 4 chances to say this thing and tell this story. And so for me, that was what was so extraordinarily moving, was seeing how deeply committed each performer was. They were really just giving it 1,000% every night, just
yes,
really digging so deep into their emotional soul and their own life experience in order to tell this story, and to share something human with other people in the audience that would make them feel something. Like, that's what excites me the most about any kind of live theater, is that kind of risk taking. It's so extraordinary, and it's something that
it really is.
we just don't get to see very often or appreciate. So I
Yeah,
I really appreciate you taking the time to, dedicate one of your podcasts to this conversation, because it is something that feels more rarefied than it should, and more esoteric than I think it should.
I agree, and that's why I feel so honored and so in gratitude to have you on here, because I did for my son. It was similar to how my dad exposed me to it. I think that's something we as parents, who are parents rather, and even if you don't have children, sharing with friends to expose people to these other beautiful art forms is a part of our vocation as well, to share this experience of all this beauty in the world. And for me, with my son, I wanted him to be able to get that experience. And I've shared it. And sometimes when you look like me, I'm Mr. Cool Guy with the dreads and so
Yeah,
forth. Such a nerd.
you're right. That's what's awesome. It's like, you're a walking ad for the kind, you've got it all. You've got the curiosity and the cool factor.
Yeah.
You can be, you can, you can interview the
I want
AI
them.
guy or the doctor or the artist and still be cool and all
That's right.
fun.
But I'm this huge nerd that has this appreciation and can be moved by the emotional aspect of it. And I find it extremely one of the greatest gifts that God has given persons like yourselves to create and express. And I want people to hear and watch this interview and take an opportunity to go see an opera. And on our budget nowadays, it's a little rough, but there are other independent artists and composers like yourself in local communities that are doing that and just experience it. I think that's extremely important. And my goal is that
Yeah.
people will do that. And for years, people have known that I have that love for opera because why? My dad exposed me to it. And I think it just created this moment, aside from having the shared moment with my father, but seeing these and hearing these beautiful voices and seeing these live people create these emotional feelings while singing so beautifully. And you know,
Mm.
within my community. I think this is another element that somewhat gets me in trouble, but even in minority communities, Black communities and Hispanic communities, sometimes we get locked in these stereotypical ways that we're supposed to only appreciate this music and that
Mm.
music. And
Mhm.
people miss out on how beautiful it is
Yeah,
by staying locked in those. And it also goes
totally.
back to when you said, and it goes back to what you said too, as far as some of the other elements of the love stories and so forth. So we get in these boxes and we don't get to experience some of the beautiful things like Hildegard and like opera. And I'm
Mm.
hoping with my podcast show, I want people to know, check things out that can offer such a transformative, beautiful portion to your life to have these experiences. And for me, it was just well done. And I got to say also, the orchestra and the voices, magnificent,
Oh, thank you
absolutely
so much.
magnificent.
Thank you
So
so
it's
much.
just, oh, my pleasure. You are absolutely welcome. Just magnificent, magnificent. I
That's
wanted to touch on this. I
yeah,
know our time is getting short.
sure.
So in talking about the spiritual element of
Yeah.
Hildegard, your spirituality takes what form?
Oh, I love this question. I mean, I don't get asked this very often, but I mean, I'm not a religious person in a traditional sense. I think I'm a very spiritual person, but I don't believe in any particular. I don't subscribe to any particular institutional kind of religion. I'm not even sure if I believe in God. I think I do, but I'm not totally sure. I believe in definitely believe in spirituality though, and I believe in worship, if that makes sense. I really believe in the act of awe and wonder and showing reverence for things that are bigger than us. I love nature. I love music. Those are my two versions of the divine. And but I also find myself often thinking about, you know, what is beyond this mortal coil, what is beyond our what we can see and hear and feel. And I think a lot about infinity and space and time, and I'm not sure how God figures into that, but I think a lot about I don't know, just uh, communicating with loved ones who aren't there. You know, there's this sense of things we don't understand about the universe, things that don't make sense to us, um, that we can't comprehend. All of that is so fascinating to me, and I spend a lot of time thinking about it, even if I don't have answers. And so I try to cultivate that in my kids, which I think is like a sense of reverence and awe, or just wonder at the universe, and love being the most powerful force I think on Earth. So I I try to think about, like, when I get down about the state of the world, this or that, I try to remember love, because there is so much that's dark in the world, and so much that's broken,
Mhm.
and it's very easy to feel like we as a human race are just hurting ourselves constantly over and over. And how can you not despair at the state of the world all the time? And for me, the way to do that is to think about nature and music and art and animals and love of, you know, the people that we love, and the feelings of love we get from creativity and pursuing the things that we love. I don't know. For me, that becomes my kind of religion. That kind of orientation to the world as like a remembering the sense of wonder in everything, that becomes my spiritual orientation, if that makes any sense.
It makes great deal of sense to me. Well, part of it is, to me, it's evident because not only did you choose Hildegard because of her story, but part of my personal belief is we, as these spiritual creatures and these human shells, we are always connecting to some of the spiritual element of ourselves, that other part. And in selecting that and putting on such a beautiful production, to me, that speaks to that spiritual side of ourselves. So it makes a great deal of sense to me.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that was a huge part of what drew me to Hildegard's story. Like, I mean, I'm fascinated by religion and the way that politics and history and religion all are mixed up together. All of that is fascinating to me, but generally, I don't have a very favorable impression of institutional religions. I think a lot of times they've been responsible for some of the worst calamities in the history of the world. And so, and the oppression, that so many, religions have caused different people and women, different race, whatever, religion has sometimes been at the heart of some of the worst things humanity has done to ourselves. But this idea of magic and worship and something unseen and powerful that's bigger than us, I think that is endlessly fascinating to not just me, but lots of people. We don't often have a sense of magic anymore in our world, right? It's sort of we're about phones and technology and science. And I think to look back at a time in the world where religion and, not necessarily religion, but magic just held more sway because people couldn't control anything in their lives. And so the only way to have a sense of control was to imagine that you had control via religion or worship or whatever. But that way of engaging with the world just had more magic in it. It had more mystery and mysticism and magic. And so all of that to me is very fascinating. And because opera is a world where you're singing your feelings, that already is sort of requires you to suspend a certain amount of disbelief, and sort of live in a more magical world. So for me, Hildegard was a natural, when I first started thinking about an opera, that was the first thing I thought of, because she already lived in a time and a place where that was the case. Like there was so much magic and mystery, and music was sort of the linchpin in a lot of ways between religion and daily experience and creativity and worship. So I wanted to go deeper into that, my imagining of that whole world of hers. But I don't know. I often think about what my next opera will be, and I'm not sure.
I was just going to ask you that. Perfect timing. So we're on that vibe page, Sarah.
I know.
I was just going to ask.
Well, it's funny because my favorite parts of this opera were the places where she had her visions, because that's where you can, stop the storytelling and just go directly into the magic and the mystery. And sometimes I think, I want to write an opera where I'm only living in that mystery world, where I don't have to do any plot, I don't have to. But on the other hand, you sort of, but on the other hand, you sort of need some plot in order to get the audience to care about the stakes, And I think this is the tricky thing with opera, is sometimes is like you're trying to deliver a certain amount of storytelling, but it's in music. And music really bloats a text. It's hard to deliver a lot of information via music. So I think this is always a struggle for opera composers, like how much plot versus how much emotion. And I want to live more in the world of emotion and magic and mystery. So I don't know. I've been looking at some different stories, I don't know, some kind of fantastical stories. I'm hoping to just find one that also, I don't know, I'm always interested in telling stories of people that are chafing against power structures. That's always interesting to me. I want to tell stories that make the world a better place. I want to find ways to, be the change that you want to see in the world, in the art that I make. So that was definitely part of my agenda with Hildegard, was like telling a woman's story, or telling a story about an oppressed character, how she fought against power structures. But if I write another opera like that, it'll be compared to Hildegard. So I'm trying to find
something different. I get that. That's very, very interesting. I really understand that. Yeah, I really get that.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Just last night, I was watching a movie about this female painter, mystic.
On Netflix?
On Netflix.
On Netflix?
Actually, it was Apple Prime, but still, yeah, basically streaming platform. Yeah, but it's, and I'm drawn to these. It's this woman, Hilma af Klint, who is this Swedish painter, but I'm drawn to these stories of women or of people who were like fighting against forces of oppression. But we'll have to see. I don't want it to be too Hildegard like. So we'll have to see. But yeah.
That was my next question. What's your next project? So you've answered that. So now we get to our speed round.
Okay.
Okay. So these are simple pick and choose questions. So wine, red or white?
Red or white?
Yes.
Okay. And super quick answer is red.
Okay.
Because because of blood, because it's guts, it's the stuff of life.
I didn't expect that. I expect that one. That's good. Okay. Taylor Swift or Beyonce?
Oh, that's a hard one. Beyonce okay. For me. But I love them both. I think they're great.
Country or rock?
Oh, rock, definitely. I want I want to say that I love all music, but I have a weird thing against country. I don't know what it is. I have a hard time.
I didn't expect that either.
I don't know. I have a hard time with country. I don't know what that's about.
Summer baby or winter baby?
Oh, a winter baby, because both my babies are winter babies. But I prefer summer to winter. So, but the mom part of me took over that answer. Yeah.
Oh yeah, me too. Old school or new school hip hop?
Oh, old school for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Good answer for us. Italian food or Chinese?
Oh, Italian. That's my favorite. Yeah.
And part of it, would you say, just to elaborate, I'm curious, because I think we East Coasters have a certain inclination toward Italian food. I think it's somewhat an East Coast thing, but we get in this weird conundrum because Chinese food is also very prevalent on the East Coast. Would you agree?
Yes, it is. That was the only takeout I had growing up was Chinese food. And meanwhile, I'm not sure how Chinese it really was,
Yeah. That was questionable. That was questionable.
Yeah, Chinese food in New Jersey, not always the best. Yeah.
Right. Oh, you know what? There's too many jokes in there.
But we don't want to get in too much trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I forgot. East Coast pizza or West Coast pizza?
I'm not even sure I really know what West Coast pizza is, so I'd have to say East Coast. Is West Coast like? What is West Coast pizza? What is?
It's California Pizza Kitchen is usually
the best
on that, and so it's it's similar to the vibe of Californians. It's kind of a hodgepodge. It's not really definitive. So Chicago, we have a style. Boston has a style. New Jersey has a style. New York has a style. California is like its own. It's like California, an amalgamation of all the other. Yeah, at least that's what I find. At least that's what I find. I know.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to say California pizza it's laid back, throwing everything on top of bread with marinara sauce.
Yeah. You got like the pineapple and the broccoli and the ham and the onion and the tomatoes.
Yes.
Yeah. Totally. I have to say, I think my favorite pizza is maybe New Haven pizza. It's pretty opposite of, I think, California. It's like thin and very
interesting.
Yeah. New Haven pizza is the best I've had. But New York is pretty good too. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Favorite sport?
Oh gosh, I'm so unsporty.
So you're not Sporty Spice?
Oh God, no. I'm like the opposite. I'm so bad. I kind of hate sports, to be honest. Sorry, is that terrible? But my
No.
husband, my husband loves tennis, so he watches a lot of tennis, and so I sometimes enjoy just asking him what's going on there. But anytime I've ever asked anyone to explain a sport to me, it goes in one ear and out the other. I just don't have the interest, and I wish I did. It would have made my childhood easier, but I was like that nerdy kid who got picked last for every sports team, and I was always in my own world when it came to sports. Like, what? The ball would fly past me. I would have no idea I was supposed to catch it. Like, I'm terrible. Yeah.
I get that. I
What's your
get that.
favorite sport?
But it has to be UFC fighting, and a lot of people wouldn't think that, but I
Oh,
love UFC. Yeah, and it's because well, music is my first love, and I see that as a sport sometimes.
oh, interesting.
But
Interesting.
UFC, yeah, UFC. There's such to me the discipline it takes to learn various forms of martial arts and to use a technique or to find a technique for your opponent who might have a collection of other forms of martial arts to put those in a ring together. And it's not just about bashing each other. It's modifying the techniques to win the match. And I've always found that very fascinating.
Yeah, super fascinating. Yeah, I know nothing about that, but that sounds really interesting. I should
It is.
I should do more
It is.
investigation of that. What does
Yeah, it
UFC
seems
stand
that
for?
United Fighting Championship,
Okay.
Ultimate Fighting Championships. I'm sorry. And so what you have various, and there's so many incredible athletes in the form, but so one, just putting the layman's term, one fighter, and it's male and female both, which I enjoy both matches.
Mm.
So one opponent might have karate, jujitsu, and wrestling, and the other one might have um, taekwondo, wrestling, and boxing. And so they combine their various techniques and matched in the ring. And it's similar to a chess match. Which technique or form of that martial arts can you implement against your opponent, and which is going to get you to the points and or to the win? So it's a combination of punches and kicks and wrestling techniques. And it's almost like dancing. It's almost like dancing because
Yeah.
have to you have to study your opponent's techniques. And I've just always found it very interesting. Boxing would be a
Yeah.
close second, and then football.
Okay.
Oh yeah, but
Interesting.
yeah,
No, interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you play as well? Like you do the sport yourself, these martial
Oh,
arts?
I wish.
Mm.
No, I've just, I think it was honestly growing up. My two of my older brothers, we used to watch a lot of Bruce Lee movies,
Uh-huh.
and that's given my age away as well. And my brothers used to do the fake lip moving kind of stuff, and it really created this fascination about Mars. They in the
Yeah,
old
yeah,
school you
yeah.
see the
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, I
and
remember. Yeah.
yeah, and I used to get so fascinated by that. Well, then my dad, we used to get beat up all the time because we were church kids, and
Uh-huh.
so we were the church kids, and so we would go to school, and the kids would try and fight with us. And my parents weren't like that, even though my dad was a sports person. And so my mom said, we have to get them to learn some discipline, fight to help defend themselves, but not promote the violent aspect of it. And so he enrolled us in karate. And
Oh.
that became, yeah. And as a kid growing up, getting into karate began this fascination. And UFC really wasn't around back then too much, but you were having, uh, in New York, you would have different street fights, so to speak. That's not the best way to put them, but
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
grew, yeah, and it grew into its own form, and it grew with me as a UFC and myself. We were growing up together, and I saw the evolution of the sport from its beginnings. And I remember going to see different matches in these roller rinks. They would convert roller rinks. So they'd have the WWF kind of wrestling stuff, and then they turned it into fighting ring for UFC fighters. And seeing the evolution of those matches really created an appreciation for me for the art form.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. That's
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it really is an art form. That's
It
yeah.
really, really is. It
I
really
like what
is.
you said
And
about it being like dancing. Yeah, that
it
really.
is. It really is. It tends to be because, again, you're not only matching the footwork, and there's this movement and gracefulness to the movement of it. And, and then it also becomes somewhat a spiritual thing, because I think the intimacy of dance and or that fight form, there's a kind of grace that's to it. And
Yeah,
that's why I said it's also not just the violence, but there's a grace to it. And I find that very wonderful to observe, but also
yeah,
you get this, you get to see this. So it's
yeah.
one
There's
of the
like
things I love.
discipline. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes, very much so.
yeah.
Very much so.
Control and
So
discipline choreography. Yeah,
yes, yes. And the training, the discipline it takes with the training, I think is extraordinary.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so I know we're getting on your time. I don't want to take too much of your time. Favorite book you've ever read?
Oh my gosh. Whoa, that's a hard one. Favorite book I've ever read. I think it comes back to Kill a Mockingbird. That's always been
Mm,
my favorite.
great. Yes, great book.
Nice, but that was also like sometimes I wonder, is that just my favorite because that was my first favorite, as a kid.
Yeah,
Like I read it in middle school and I just loved it so much. And then I reread it in high school and reread it again recently. And I don't know, but it's hard not to compare other books to that. I think the writing is so beautiful,
yes, I
the
agree.
story, the messaging, everything about it. It's hard for me to get away from that one. But
I agree.
yeah. What's
I
your
agree.
favorite book?
It's still, I'm similar to you because I have really kind of a top 10 that they're really equal with each other. But
Mhm.
immediate gun to my head would be a close tie between the Bible and Alvin Toffler's Future Shock. And I keep trying to
Oh,
get people to check him out. I'm a huge Alvin Toffler fan. And people get surprised about that all the time. But I first got turned on to Future Shock. Oh man, I had to be about 13.
uh-huh.
And I was so fascinated. I didn't understand a lot of some of the philosophical aspects he was drawing upon with how things will be shaping in the future. But for me, the first appreciation, because I reread it since at least 12, 13 times later as I matured,
Uh-huh.
but I was fascinated with his study of patterns of humanity. I was
Mm.
fascinated with
Mhm.
his patterns of humanity and how he
Interesting.
saw he and his wife both were futurists. And here's my really nerdy side coming out, so don't laugh.
I
And
love it.
so I was just so fascinated in him studying the patterns of human behavior and social constructs and the rate of speed that we are moving into this technological age. It was really captivating to me that someone could put this into words. So when I first read as a young person, part of my sci-fi love, like Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica, and all those were, I was thinking how we're going to come from this a point of humanity and its growth to that. What's going to
Yeah.
make that leap? And Alvin Toffler kind of filled in a gap of this big change and how psychologically it's going to be a really rough adjustment to moving forward. And
Mhm.
it has always captivated me. It still holds my interest. And I've read his other books since Power Shift and some of that, but I just have found him to be really interesting. And as far as my favorite book, where I can
Yeah.
still read it again and I can still read it again.
Oh,
And
that's so
currently,
great. I need to
and
recommend you a piece of music by my dear friend William Bertel. He and I started this record label together with our friend Judd as well. But anyway, he's a great composer, and he wrote a piece called Future Shock
ah,
about the book. And I think you would find it interesting. You should check it out. It's a string
please,
quartet with electronics, and it's fantastic. It's really a great
I
piece.
would love that. Please send it
I'll
over. I
send it
will
to you.
absolutely
Yeah,
check it out.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
please do. And I really I still can sit down. And Power Shift for me has a different tone to it, but
Mm,
Future Shock would have to be my favorite. And then as newer books, because I put my favorite books in a different category, I just read from Chase Hughes a
mm,
book called Tongue,
mm, hmm,
and it's a very different book because he examines language, the
uh-huh.
English language, and and so forth. And I haven't read anything like this ever, ever, ever,
Mm.
ever.
Hmm.
It's a very fascinating examination of, and even the way he writes the book, your mind makes an adjustment to his writing style. So
Oh, interesting. Oh, wow.
yes, yeah, yes, very much so, very
Yeah.
much
Oh,
so.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's great. What's the name of the writer again?
Chase Hughes.
Chase Hughes. Okay.
Yes,
Interesting.
and the book is titled Tongue.
Tongue.
I'll send that over to you as
Yeah,
well. Yeah,
yeah.
and it's not a long book. It's not a long book, but it's hypnotically entrancing. I really have to say that. But you get this. I know. Just since we were talking about it on the program tonight, you're it takes you into a different dimension, so to speak.
Yeah,
As
I love
you,
that.
yeah, it's very much a interesting way of writing, the style, and what he is discussing. So
Yeah.
fascinating, fascinating.
Yeah.
He himself is a fascinating person, ex-CIA agent, and
Oh, wow.
he discusses some elements of ways to free from this isolationism and different things. So he's a fascinating person. So looking forward to having him on the program at some point. But
Amazing. Yeah.
yeah, really, really interesting author. But
Yeah.
so, Sarah, I'm hoping we haven't drawn out too much of your time.
Not at all. This has been such a fun conversation. I've loved it. Really, really a great chat with you, Seth. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Oh, I tell you, the pleasure truly is mine. You are immediately one of my favorite people I have ever had the pleasure of meeting in person.
Oh, goodness
Uh,
gracious. That means
I truly mean
I,
that. I
oh,
truly mean
that's
that.
too kind. That's too kind. Well, likewise, this has been, I hope we can do this again sometime. It would be a lot of fun.
We Don't tempt me with an invitation. I will definitely say, "Now, hey Sarah, you got some time to talk about your new project." Don't
Yeah,
tempt me
well,
because I just
you're such a fascinating thinker, Seth. You've got such
thank you.
wide-ranging interests. It's really fun to chat with you because you're not the average interviewer. You've got a lot of places you draw from with your questions. I love that. It's really, really makes for a
Thank you.
fun conversation. Yeah.
I thank you. This was so enjoyable beyond belief, and it not only met my expectations, but it surpassed them. And I have to say, I am just so much a fan of yours in the best way, supportive way. I am wishing further success for you, and that people become more understanding of your work and exposed to your work. And I can't express enough with enough passion to say, please, ladies and gentlemen, check out anything that Sarah Kirkland Snider is doing. Please check out Hildegard and this incredibly fascinating entity that has entered our space and our zone. And I'm just so thrilled.
Oh, those are incredibly kind words. Thank you so much, Seth. That really means a lot to me. Thank you.
Truly meant. And please thank your family for allowing you to share time with us as well.
Oh my gosh, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, to be continued,
Last
I
thing,
hope. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
last thing, I meant to, this is supposed to capsulize the interview. One word you feel describes you best or is your favorite word. Either will do.
Oh gosh. Oh, save the easy question for last, I see.
Right. I know, right.
Oh gosh, the word that describes me best, or I
Or
don't
your favorite
know.
word.
Curious, maybe? I love that word.
Oh,
I mean, I love, well,
oh,
I think I'm curious in probably all the ways that you can define that. Like I'm interested, but I'm also strange. I don't know. Curious can be good and bad. I don't know. I try to stay open and curious, but I also just like that where I like people who are curious.
yes.
I like
That's why we've had such a good time because I'm that same way.
you're that same way. And I love that about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love
Yes.
curious minds. I think, and I feel like the world doesn't often encourage us to be that way. You know, we kind of are
Yes.
trained to
Yes.
be in, like you said, in these little boxes and stay in our
Yes.
boxes. And I'm very interested in meeting people and having experiences that bring me outside of those boxes. So I think you are too. So I think that's why we're
Yeah,
kindred
I
spirits.
am. That's why I definitely feel like we're kindred spirits as well. And I think that's also why you dig Chase Hughes. He explores some of those avenues and those relationships.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, for sure,
Well,
for
we'll
sure.
start a book. We'll start a book club, and we'll keep
Oh
it.
yes, I would love that. I would love that. Well, to our audience, we thank Sarah Kirkland Snider so much for being here today for our Makers Bar audience on the Seth Guru Baxter Show. It has truly been our honor and such a delight, more than I can ever say, and I have said a number of times. Thank you again, Sarah, so much for talking to this nerd here.
Oh, thank you so much. Right back at you. Thank you for talking to this nerd. Such a pleasure.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, I end all broadcasts with this term. The revolution is the lovolution that we want. We want the change of love. We want love to become the revolution that we spread across our globe and our planet and to each other. So let's go out and create this lovolution. Ladies and gentlemen, for the Seth Guru Baxter podcast show and our tremendously awesome guest, Sarah Kirkland Snider. Sarah, be blessed, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And I'm looking forward to us communicating and for the book title to be sent over to you as well.
Me too. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Seth. Such a pleasure. All right. And thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. It's truly a pleasure too. You take good care, and we'll be staying in contact.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. Okay.
Absolutely. Take good care.
Okay.
You
bye.
Bye-bye.